you leaders, the organizations, were asking us for several weeks about the EU regulations, about the GDPR, about the consent forms, and so on. And we wanted to invite an expert, not just us, but an expert who actually is working with European projects and on the GDPR, data protection regulations, and so on. And we collected your questions, and we would like to ask Caroline Harrison, welcome, several questions which might help you later with your European projects. Hello.
Hi, thanks, Anna. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to help yourself, the organisation, and to answer some of these questions, because in my experience, it can be quite complicated and it can feel very daunting when you're dealing with people's personal data. So yes, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. But all these regulations, okay, they're not so new, yeah, but they're not so old. How did you come up with this role? What was your path? What is your expertise in?
So I was in with GDPR right at the beginning. So it took many years of 28 EU member states agreeing a set of principles in which to protect individuals' personal data, and the result of which eventually was EU GDPR. But then each country has to adopt their own regulation within their legal framework. So there are, more or less, it's the same across the whole of Europe. However, there are some slight differences, which I don't think will apply in today's thing, so I don't need to mention that. But so it was because there was good regulation in place for the physical world, but not for the digital world. So the laws hadn't caught up. So it was really important that the laws reflect how people operate in the digital world. So whether that's on a mobile or a website, or somebody's being bombarded and harassed with lots and lots of emails and lots of SMSs. So that's why it came about. And they gave us a 2-year period in which it became enforceable. And if people were around at that point, they would have seen headlines that were very sensational, saying you'll go to jail and you're going to be fined 4% of your group global turnover. And so they look at people like Google and Facebook or Meta now, and they'll say that's millions and billions of fines. Oh dear, dear, dear. But we got involved in it because we think it's the right thing to do. And if that is your approach, and you say, let's apply some common sense, and it is the right thing to do. And one of the key things that we do as an organisation is that we help individuals and organisations with education. Because if you understand what it is and why it is, you're more likely to do it. So some companies might dictate to their employees, you will do this, but we find it's much better to explain to people why. And so we will use an analogy, for example, like, how do you feel when you get harassed? So you've bought something online, and before you know it, 3 times a day you're getting emails from them, or same on your cell phone, you get SMSs or phone calls constantly. So just think how you feel when your data is misused, and apply that in your work environment. And you'd be probably quite surprised when you do that, how quickly you might change some of your practices. You just stop to think. So if you were to get in trouble and a data protection authority were to check on you, and there is a different data protection authority for every single EU country, they would come and they would look at a few key things. First of all, a website. So your website is really important, or anything you put out in terms of communication. Your website, first of all, should have a very clear cookie banner that explains that you're going to use cookies on your website and what that means. So you should have the option for people to switch off certain cookies. And secondly, you need to display a privacy notice, so privacy policy, privacy notice. And the other mistake some people make is that they think it only applies to visitors to the website. But no, this is your public notice to say this is how we treat everybody's personal data. And let's not forget, it's just personal data. So something that could identify you, Anna, or me, Carolyn, by putting two pieces of information together, we can work out who I am. And then it's classed as, people call it PII, personal identifiable information. So it's not all data, it's just personal data.
Okay, so what is the personal data then?
Yeah,
photo?
very good question. I mean, I can send that on for you to share with people, but the main thing is my name. Believe it or not, photographs of me can be considered personal data. My email address, my phone number, my home address, they are the key bits of personal data that we tend to use. Then there are what's considered more sensitive data. So that is where you might ask questions about people's gender, religion, health. And then obviously, if you've got children's data, then that needs extra sensitivity. So it's called sensitive data. So that should be included in your privacy notice. You should say, this is how we treat the data, your data, and this is the reasons why we collect it, and this is how we protect it, and this is how long we might store it for. So just some key, and you can get templates quite easily to help you fill that in. So it's not just visitors to the website, it could be, let's take one of your youth camps, for example, it could be attendees at the youth camp. How do you deal with their information when they apply for their children to join that? Third thing that's really important is education and awareness. So if people understand what GDPR is, then they know just naturally that they should protect it. They'll think about not leaving it lying around. They'll think about how they might send it and share it with somebody else. So data sharing can be something that causes you a problem without you realizing it, because if you needed to share lots of contact details with a third party in order for them to deliver that service for you, you're still responsible and you are still liable, even though you've passed that information on to them. Third party agreements where you will put some emphasis. So you can draw up something really simple and it just says, this is how we will transfer the data, and this is how we expect you to look after it, and this is how we expect you to delete it at this point after you've finished doing the job for us. So that's a general thing in terms of trying not to draw attention to yourself with data protection authorities, is that you clearly broadcast how you look after data, why you collect it. You make sure anybody that works with you or for you is educated, aware of their responsibilities, because you as a person or an organization could still be liable even when you've outsourced it to somebody else.
Does it mean that any leader of organization should appoint one person or a company?
There are certain rules in terms of why legally you might have a data protection officer, but that you have to have a lot of employees, or you have to be processing highly sensitive data. If you're using a lot of programming and so the computer makes the decision, I don't think you're going to be doing that in your line of work. We don't worry about that, but it does depend. Then you also have to decide. So a data protection officer, lots of people appoint them, or they ask somebody within the organization to be responsible, but that's quite difficult because they have to be independent and objective. So they need to be the person that can actually say, no, that's not how I would do it. That's not to say that the organisation always does what they say, but that's the idea. It's their independence. So you can have somebody internally. You could appoint somebody externally, and there's, like ourselves, there's people out there that offer that as a virtual service. So you could have a virtual security officer for cybersecurity, and you can have a virtual data protection officer. But some organisations don't legally need a DPO, data protection officer, but they'll have somebody internally that is the person that checks things, like a privacy manager, etc. So it's always a good idea to have somebody either advising you or within the organization that is the last check. So if you are sending lots and lots and lots of communications out, so lots of emails, newsletters, etc., and you're very busy and you're trying to do lots of different jobs at the same time, you could make mistakes and you could end up sending, for example, the classic one is sending it in the CC field or the to field in an email and not the BCC. So in the UK or I know other EU countries, you might just get told off if you did it once, but if you keep doing it, then you could get fined, because depending on what the subject is, clearly I shouldn't know that another 100 people are getting that email, and I could see all their email addresses. I could take them and start harassing them with my own campaigns, couldn't I? So little things like that. If you've got somebody, just checking before you press the button, or checking that the nature of the communication is within data protection framework, GDPR. So a classic one is, so I'll just give you an example. One of the things you need to do is work out how you got the data in the first place. So how did you get Carolyn Harrison's contact details? I came to an event. Part of the terms and conditions were that I was sharing my information with people at the event. Okay, tick. No problem. Or I've expressed an interest, or I was referred by somebody else. You need to know where the information came from. So the one that has got people in trouble, for example, is to go and scrape something like social media or LinkedIn, gather all that information, and then just decide that it's quite all right for you to have it. And it's quite all right for me, blast lots and lots of communications out to those people, even though they never asked to be on my mailing. So I always say, if you're going to message or email somebody the first time, just make it general. And at the footer, there should always be the ability to change your preferences or even unsubscribe from that correspondence. That's really important in terms of, so how did we get the data? Should I have it in the first place? Making a note of how you got it in case you get challenged, and making it easy for the person receiving communications, particularly marketing materials, to actually come back to you and say, I'm interested in the youth camp, but I'm not interested in those other events you would do over there. Or actually, I don't belong in this sector anymore. I've moved on. So can you unsubscribe me or delete me? And I think that's common sense, isn't it? If you think about it, it's common sense, actually. You know how you would feel, and we feel, when people constantly send things and follow it up with, oh, you must have missed my first email, so I'll just keep sending it and sending it and sending it. How long should you keep data for? Most people's privacy policies will say keep the data for as long as is necessary to do the job, because sometimes it varies, doesn't it? But there should really be a rationale as to why you're keeping it. So let's say you're invoicing somebody, clearly you need it for tax reasons, so you would keep it for 6 years. If somebody was come to a camp or an event you've organised and they've expressed an interest in wanting to come to the next one, by virtue of that, they've agreed for you to keep their contact details. I think one of the things that you and I have discussed in the past is when we come to children and minors, don't worry as much about data protection if you're running a live event with children. A bit like in a school scenario on school trips, you have to let the people responsible for those children be able to take action if they need to. And for that, they'll need a bit more of the personal information of that child. So, however, after the camp or the trip or whatever you've done has finished, why would you need to keep it? That's what I always say. Why? Give me a really good reason why you need to keep it. And if you can't, you should delete it. Even if they're coming the following year, you would start again and ask for the health. But this sits above GDPR, because you absolutely need to be able to take action with that child, but you've no right to keep it for 12 months in between the camps. Big thing, as I said, I've mentioned cookies, I've mentioned privacy notice, third parties. Any third party, so not yourself, even a contractor that's working for you, you would ask them to comply with your rules. It doesn't have to be a complicated data sharing agreement. It could be just a real simple thing, just to say that they agree to receive the data, and this is, they're processing it on your behalf. This is what they're going to do. This is how you expect them to store it securely, and this is when you expect them to delete it. And completely delete it. If you've got permission to keep just the contact details, fine.
Yes, so you mentioned several times, keep it securely. So
Yes.
let's take a small organization with, I don't know, under 10 people working, and the leader has to organize this space where to secure it and so on. So where is this secure place? What should it be?
Okay, so in the old days when we're on paper, you would have taken all the information and you would have locked it in a secure filing cabinet. So that's the physical world. So you're trying to do a similar thing in the digital world. So if you're using Microsoft or Google, they've got lots of things built in which helps protect you and the receiving party. And a lot of these things are sent in an encrypted way. Some people might not understand encryption, but that basically means that you need a special key to unlock it. It's like having a key to the filing cabinet. You need a special key to unlock it. And it's not just sitting in space. If I wanted to send you a spreadsheet, so let's say I'm only one person, two-person organization, and I haven't got a big budget for these sorts of things, there are things you can do just to make it more secure. So let's say it's an Excel spreadsheet and it's a list of names, email addresses, and phone numbers, maybe home addresses. You can password protect that spreadsheet. Ideally, you wouldn't just attach it and send it in through email, but at least you've taken that trouble to password protect that document. You would normally, if you had Microsoft 365, you may get with it OneDrive or SharePoint. The simplest and safest way is to create a secure area within that and send a link to somebody so they can download it. So it doesn't have to go through your email system. And then once they've got it, you can disable that link. So there are lots of ways that don't cost a lot of money. But if you think you're doing the equivalent of saying, well, actually, I don't need to keep it on my computer because that's not what I do with the paper. I'd be having it somewhere, in a file that was locked or a filing cabinet. So just do the same in the world of computers. So the thing that lots of people forget is that we use email like a filing cabinet. We might find that spreadsheet unprotected in my out folder, my sent folder, my in folder, and maybe I've created some directories within Outlook and I've put it in there as well. And then somebody's received it, maybe they forwarded it on, and before you know it, you've got 10 copies of that spreadsheet and none of them are protected. So just think about who needs access. Don't do a reply all and give it to everybody. Think, no, actually only one person actually needs a copy of that. I'll send the general information there and I will send that one person a link to OneDrive, SharePoint, G Drive, and allow them to come in and take what they want and upload things. It's a much safer way is to put them in one of the general packages that most of us have now, Google, Amazon, or Microsoft, and send a link. Do you think that's something that would make sense with a lot of your members in terms of how they might share them?
Yes, we mostly use the Google Workspace.
Yeah.
It's for NGOs, it's for free. It has a lot of data, a lot of tools. And one of the experts taught us how to get it for free for the NGOs.
Fantastic.
Also the Microsoft, yeah. So you're saying that to store it in the cloud would be better than on the computer?
Yes, yeah. And also lock the front door. So don't just always take it back to the physical. Think, how would I do it?
Not on the drive.
Yeah, perfect. If you needed to take that, so let's say you were going to a camp and you've got sensitive information, not anybody can pick that up if you left it somewhere, plug it in and use it. That's a perfect way because nobody then needs to have access to it because you keep it on that. They can come in and look at it on there, but they don't need a copy. Yeah, absolutely. That's a brilliant way. As you would with paper, you would put it in a locked briefcase in the old days, wouldn't you? Exactly the same. USB sticks are a bit dangerous because there's not many that are encrypted and password protected, and a lot of the computers don't have the ports for it. But that used to be a classic way to try and get malware, into people's computers, which would drop real sparkly USB sticks around for people to go, oh, could do with that, and they plug it in, and before you know it, it downloads viruses onto the computer. So, yeah, absolutely. Each time you're not sure, step back and just say, well, how would we do it in the physical world? And how would I feel about if that was my information, and it stops you collecting lots and lots of extra information just in case. So we always, I'm quite a bit older, we'll say, don't keep it just in case in Granny's attic. Let's not just put it in there, because you never know, one day we might need it. And a lot of people do that and they go, oh yeah, but this is really valuable information. No, it's not yours in the first place. If I buy something from Amazon, I loan them my home address and my information in order for them to deliver something to my house and charge my credit card. I'm not giving it to them. That's the mistake most people make. They think that they have it and they own it. You're using it just to deliver a service. And if you think like that, it stops you doing things in the way that lots of people do and end up, if things go wrong, human error, things will go wrong. People will do things and have accidents. And the fines for human error are much less than they are for organizational negligence. And that means that we've decided it doesn't apply to us and I don't need to bother. So I'll give you an example of an NGO that I've worked with in the past. And because they're part of the UN, they thought that certain things didn't apply to them, because they said, no, we don't follow the local laws in the countries we operate. We have our own standard up here. And we had to point out to them that actually, because this was about taking some donations with payment cards, that actually there was a contractual obligation. They'd signed a contract, so they had to, and they weren't above it. So being an NGO or a not-for-profit or any organization, a one-person hairdresser doesn't need to spend a lot of money, but they need to think about how they keep the information of their clients, particularly if they're taking credit card payments as well, because the numbers on the card is considered personal data. Common sense, really. And
some of the projects and some of the large European projects, yes, which involves very often thorough research of thousands of people, conferences with participants lists, data and so on. EU regulation and obligation is to keep at least 5 years all this paperwork in case the audit will come and so on. So how does it apply with what you said? So it applies more like, okay, I will keep the data until I need.
Because you just have to have a rational argument as to what you're collecting, why you're collecting it, how long you're keeping it for. And some of the countries we deal with, and I'm talking about South America, they have to keep paper because that's what the central bank says in that country. You can't just sign up for something online. You also need to have a physical signature. So they have to do it. So, I mean, we're helping them look at ways of keeping it securely. So at the moment, they've got them locked up in a fireproof safe, but they have to keep it, like you say, for quite a long time. So your place,
if some individual requests to delete the data before that.
Okay, so that's a really good question. So the rights of individuals, and when they request something of you as any form of organization, it's called a data subject access request. So members of the public are data subject, and they have the right to contact an organization and say, please, can you tell me what data you've got on me? And then, there's a series of rights, like they're allowed to make you change it if it's wrong. They could stop you processing it if you got it under the wrong for the wrong reasons. The big one is they can ask you to delete it. You can delete it. However, it depends if there's another thing, like in the case of the EU and the funding, you've got to keep it for 6 years. So you'll say, we have deleted all the information that we can, but we need to keep some basic information to comply with this. And so let's just say it was there was a legal dispute. Don't delete anything. You keep it until the legal dispute was finished. And you just write back to the individual or email back. You explain that that you will, but you can't do yet because something's happening. So that happens sometimes with employees. So I want you to get rid of me. Well, we can't because we're still having a dispute with you, for example, an ex-employee. And sometimes, as I said before, parental or guardianship will take a priority over data protection if you need that information. So don't think that data protection is the only law that applies. So tax, as we said. So yours is, the 6 years is very similar to tax, isn't it? You've got to prove that you actually had all those people and got all that money. So always look at what different legislation's there and which one's the most important that you need to comply with. So yeah, but data subject access request, just be careful is it the person that they say they are? So if it's sensitive information, you need to check that it's them. So you need proper identification. So you need a passport, ID card, or a utility bill if it's sensitive information. And the other thing, if you had a lot of information on a person, is you say, is there anything in particular that you are wanting for us to provide you with? Because otherwise, if it's a lot and it's generic, you can only give them top level. Let's just say you've got an email and it's got 5 other people's names and details in it. Unless you can what's called redact, so cover it up or remove it, you can't then share that, because then you're giving somebody else's information to the data subject. Clearly, if you've not kept it in the first place, or you've only kept a minimum amount of information, there's less information to have to delete, less information that could be lost or stolen, is what we say. So the principle of GDPR is data minimization. Obviously, not collecting stuff you shouldn't have in the first place, and with involving members of the public, usually it's some form of consent that you'll require. If it's business to business, it could be legal, it could be contractual, or the big one for business to business is legitimate interest. So you will want to advertise all the different things you're doing. You will be using legitimate interest as your basis for processing that data and sending maybe some correspondence to somebody, and they'll have the right to say, sorry, I don't want it. But in the first place, you're saying it's legitimate interest because you've got a legitimate interest and they're in your sector, for example.
Well, it makes sense, and it's quite complicated, even though it's all described in many ways. It still raises many questions and so on. So I know that you work with European projects. So how, in case we will have interest and people will approach us, how a company can be a part of a project and protect the data and financial and so on? And what else do you do?
Absolutely, yes. I have a team, and when we work with organizations, and as you know, we've worked with small organizations through to really, really big international NGOs. You get, depending if it's a one-off project, just can you come in and we do what we call a health check. So, and it's really cost effective, and we can do a digital health check. So we would look at the organization and we'd look at them from a cybersecurity and a data protection perspective, and we can see where the gaps are. So we have like an audit that we can do that helps people, and you don't need to do it all at once. You can spread it over time. You can spread the cost over time. The main thing for any data protection authority is that you show that you've been thinking about it and you're taking some steps. So I always say, if somebody hasn't done it, and they should have done, don't panic. Start from today going forward and worry about the old stuff that you've got, ring fence it, try and protect it, and then work out what you should have and what you should destroy. But do it from today and start baby steps, just baby steps that then you're not going to get into trouble if you've got the right attitude and approach and you're trying to do your best. Mistakes happen, we know that. Self-reporting yourself to a data protection authority, only do that if it's severe consequences for individual members of the public. So we always say we are an outsourced DPO for people, and they come straight to us to say, this has happened. And the most common one is sending something to the wrong person. Of all the things that always happen, it's sending something to the wrong person. So we'll say, right, okay, don't do anything. Obviously, if it's gone to the wrong person, you would email them and say, please, can you just delete it, and can you confirm you have? But if it was something that was really sensitive, then you would let the individual know and the actions you've taken. And that is what a data protection authority would want to see. So don't report yourself until you've assessed if it's high risk to the individual. Unlikely, but most, as I say, most breaches are literally sending the wrong thing. And my advice always to people when we do education is, if you want to talk about somebody, do it as if they're standing looking over your shoulder. Because if you have to give that information up and you've been saying things that weren't very pleasant about them, that's not good. So you can factually quote, this person got very cross and said this, rather than say this person was so and so, so and so. Just do it factually like that, as if they're standing over your shoulder reading it. Just be factual, and that way you won't get in trouble. Particularly then if you'd sent it to that person you're talking about by mistake. Yeah. So, and just think about a classic one. Anna, was we were running some workshops because we tried to get people to see it for themselves because they know how their organization works best. And they realized that they were using Google Calendar to invite people for interviews. And so let's say you and I need to interview, Fred Smith over here. I would send you a meeting invite and attach Fred Smith's CV to the meeting invite. And after we've done that, and let's say we never employ him, and this guy's been a bit silly and put every bit of personal information in it, it just sits in Google Calendar forever because you never thought, actually, we should delete it. You've got more information on people that work for you, whether they're contractors or employees, than you have on your customers or members of the public. You have even more of a duty of care to protect employees and contractors' details, because if you think about it, you'll have their date of birth, where they live, maybe details of their passport. I wouldn't keep that, but you will have their bank account, you will have their social security number, their tax reference. You have everything, enough to be the person. So if somebody stole, let's say you have 100 employees or 100 contractors, and it's not looked after properly, I get hold of them, I could be those people because I've got everything to be them, all the bits that you use to identify yourself. I could set a bank account up, etc., etc. So yes, so do think about not just people that you're dealing with and delivering services to, but actually people that work for you, and what information you have, how you keep it. Don't keep it longer than you need to, etc., etc. And CVs, you go out and you say, we've got an interesting project, please send it to CVs. Have a policy, and it should be then written into your privacy notice, that says we'll only keep a CV till we've finished our recruitment process. Then we will delete it. If we think that you've got the right skills and you only just missed out and there could be another opportunity, we will ask to keep your contact details only, because people's CVs change all the time. Why keep them? I'm saying if you've not got it, you can't lose it. So yeah, personnel records are the one that can cause lots of problems. In your privacy notice, also think, because you probably put lots and lots of links out on emails and websites, just make sure you've got a disclaimer that says you're not responsible for those other websites, and that they should check the privacy notices of those other people that you signpost them to. And every time you ask somebody to complete their name and email address and any other things, it should have a little button that says, you accept our privacy policy, or here's our privacy policy. So not just at the footer of your website or your email campaign. It should be on any page where you say, sign up for this event, sign up for this newsletter, download this white paper. But you need to tell them what you're doing with that information.
Yeah, we have work to do now to
Yeah.
check all our computers, folders, clouds, websites, and so on. But I think once it's done and some structure is given to all the team members, then it should be easier. It's just
it will be easier. So that's an expression that you see in information security, data protection. It's called access control. So how many people do you give keys to your house? It's the same with computers and the folders. So only give the keys. So in the old-fashioned way, a bank manager. So probably, people that worked at the bank might have a key to the building, but there was only 2 people that ever had a key for the safe. So the real bits that matter, the crown jewels, the really sensitive stuff, make sure that you're not putting it in a general G Drive folder where everybody can see it. That should just have what you call access control. So it's on a permission based. So it depends on your role you act in as to what information and what folders you've got access to. And you can give somebody access temporarily and then revoke the access when they've done what they need to do. And that saves worrying about emailing things or forgetting something. You can say, I'm going to give you access for 7 days, and then it'll go. You can do that in all those systems. You can revoke it. You know, when you've got somebody that responsible for everything, you can have a bit like an emergency situation in an organization called break glass. So you'll say only this one person has this because it's very sensitive. But if something should happen, there's a process in place that allows that person also get access to it. So, but please feel
Thank
free
you
to come
so
back with
much.
more questions. Well,
Yeah, thank
there'll
you
be
so
more
much.
questions.
We will be asking questions later, and maybe someone will have questions directly. I see your email is not personal, so maybe we can share your email if anyone.
Yes, of course you can. Absolutely share my email address. Yeah. Very happy to help. Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you very much.